So we're ready to get started here with the inductions now for the pioneers and legends. We induct into two categories, the pioneers being those folks that didn't directly race, but everything else that encompasses the sport, and the legends being the race car drivers. Every inductee gets a chance to give a speech, and they also have one or more individuals that give them their introduction and share some stories as well. So if this is your first time here, that's a little bit about how the program will work. We'll go back and forth between the pioneers and the legends all the way through the 10 inductees that you see on the stage with us here tonight. The 7 this evening, that is Kirby Arnold, and to talk a little bit about Kirby, good friend Lyndall Scranton.
Thank you, Trenton, very much. You know, one of the great things about this Racers Reunion is the opportunity to get together every year and share memories and preserve the history of the great sport of auto racing in the Ozarks. I'm sure many of you were able to browse the displays tonight, the pictures and the stories that are on display in the room here. Kirby's byline is on many of those stories from back in the glory days of racing that were held right here at the fairgrounds. He grew up in Rolla, came to Springfield in 1973 to attend college, got a job that year at the Springfield News Leader, and they just happened to need a racing reporter at that time. And if you ever worked in the newspaper business, sports writers, they love to cover the basketball, the football, the baseballs, but very few sports writers step up and want to cover motorsports. You know, Kirby had a passion for it, and he took it and ran with it. You know, and that was just what we needed in a historic time in racing in that era here in Springfield. You know, he would cover the races on Friday night, and Saturday morning there would be a story and full results in the newspaper, which at that, you know, it's hard to believe in this day and age, but the newspapers covered things like that at that time and got it in the next morning. Kirby moved to the Pacific Northwest in 1984, and I was privileged to slide into the racing beat. You know, he established a model for excellence for it. It was easy for me just to follow that model, just to keep it rolling over the years, and I appreciate him showing how to do that. Even though he covered Major League Baseball primarily when he was in the Seattle area for those years, he never lost his passion for motorsports. I know he kept up with what was going on back here in the Ozarks and the racing community. He left the newspaper business just a few years ago, but he has been able to get back into to writing about motorsports for the Indy Racing League website. He still attends the Indy 500 on an annual basis, and we're going to get him to some local races back here next summer, I think. We're going to get him back here, and he's going to make a stop at some of the local tracks. But tonight I'm proud to welcome my old friend and co-worker into the Ozarks Area Racers Hall of Fame. Please welcome Kirby Arnold.
Wow, thank you, Lyndall. I gotta say, if anybody could have taken over that beat after I left the news leader, it's that guy right there. And I knew Lyndall was the perfect person for the job because he grew up here, he knows the fabric of this community, he knows what it's all about, he knows what racing is all about because he grew up here. And he took that and ran with it, and he did so much better than I did, I guarantee you. So thank you so much, Lyndall. I got a few people I want to thank here, and I want to tell you my favorite Larry Phillips story, okay? First of all, just to the Racers Association here, for preserving the memory of racing here. What you all do, obviously, I haven't been here for almost 35 years. The last time I was here on this property, the main straightaway ran right down here. And I spent a lot of my time over in the pits or even over on at the pit gate, seeing who's going to come in through the pit gate on Friday nights. So to see the association here do what they do to preserve the memory so generations to come can know the history of this place, to know what Larry Phillips did, Lester Freeby, Jim Campbell, I can just go on, Corky Wynn. It was the place to be on Friday nights, and I can't emphasize enough how important it is for this history to be told. And I'm so glad that there's people here to do it, and that these displays are back here, that Marty has put together this Larry Phillips car. which brings back a ton of memories for me, so I really, really appreciate it. My wife Debbie and I got here today. You know, like I said, it's been 35 years since we drove out of here and headed toward the Pacific Northwest. So I decided I want to go down South Campbell and check out the Handy Dan hardware store where I used to go and buy stuff. And there's a big Bass Pro Shops there now. So, and of course this place is completely changed. Racing is different, but I'm so happy to see that racing is as strong as it is, and to hear all of the track managers come up here and talk about what's going on at their tracks. Makes me want to come back and maybe spend the whole summer here if I could. That would be awesome. I want to thank Marty Edelman, the executive sports editor, the late executive sports editor for the news leader, for hiring me. I walked in on Marty one day and I just came in wanting a part-time job to take scores on Friday nights. And they said, yeah, Marty's upstairs in that room up there. Well, I walk up there, I have this book of clips, and Marty's eating lunch up there. I interrupted his lunch and told him what I wanted to do, and he said, sure, come back tomorrow, you're hired. So, had no idea what I was doing, but I had some great editors there who showed me how to do it. Another person I really want to thank is Steve Renfro, who had the racing beat for the news leader before I did. Not long after I got there, Steve quit the paper. I don't know why, I don't know where he went, but that was my in right there. And I went right to Marty and I said, I would really like to cover racing if I could. And like Lyndall said, there's a lot of stick and ball mentality in the media, especially in newspapers and everything. And so I love being around the racetrack. I didn't grow up as in a racing family or anything like that. I grew up in Rolla. I went out to Charlotte Speedway to watch Russ Wallace race. And I learned what the chrome horn was at that point too. And I didn't know anything about race cars, the mechanics of race cars, spring rates or gear ratios or anything like that. But I sure liked the people and I sure liked the competition. And I just knew I wanted to be around it. So I just want to thank the news leader for putting me in that position to be able to cover the races here. I want to thank all the racers and everybody involved with racing around here, because I would go down into the pits and talk to all you guys, and sometimes you weren't real happy with the way things went, and sometimes you were, but everybody was so nice to me and accommodating and helped me out with the stories that I wrote, whether I was at my hometown in Rolla, Baltimore, Monette, Sedalia, Odessa, or right here at the fairgrounds, where really back then in the 70s and early 80s before we left, Friday night was an event in this town. It really was. Especially, I want to thank all of you fans and everybody who are part of this sport. I've covered a lot of sports. When I went up to Seattle, I covered Major League Baseball. I was able to cover Super Bowl teams. I was in the Chicago Bulls locker room in 1996 after Michael Jordan won his 6th NBA championship. I was in the United Center that night to see all of that. And I guarantee you, of all the sports that I've covered, across the board, there's not one group of people involved who have the passion for their sport like racers do. Racers, their families, their fans. It's a real community, and that's one thing I've really gathered from everything everybody said here tonight. It's such a community, and I appreciate you all just kind of welcoming me into it. I really did, and it's been such a big part of my life. Like I said, I covered baseball for a number of years. I retired a few years ago, and I've gotten back into some racing riding, doing a little bit of freelance work for the IndyCar series, and it's been a lot of fun. But I also like just going and hanging out at the racetrack. My house, I have a home in Phoenix, pretty close to the ISM Raceway down there, or Phoenix International Raceway, so I spend a little time there. And I remember a few years ago, before a race, I was sitting up in the grandstand before one of the Cup races. The person sitting real close to me is dressed head to toe in Kyle Busch gear. And they look at me and they say, so who's your favorite driver? Who do you want to win today? And I'm thinking, if I say anybody but Kyle Busch, there might be a fight here or something. Well, I gotta tell you, Kyle Busch is not my favorite driver. I think he's a great driver. And I thought a little bit, and I told him, you know what? My favorite drivers really don't run this series anymore. You know, Rusty Wallace is retired. Kenny Schrader is retired. Dick Trickle is retired. They're not here anymore. Mark Martin is retired. So I can't say I want them to win the race because they're not here. But I will tell you one guy who is my favorite, the guy I enjoyed watching more than any on a week in, week out basis. His name is Larry Phillips. And I told this person about Larry Phillips and how dominant he was around here. And he was so good. And Larry was good to me. I was extremely intimidated when I went to talk to Larry, I guarantee you that. But I'll also tell you, he always answered my questions when I was down on pit road. He always took my calls when I was at the shop. And I appreciated everything that Larry did, you know, to help me out. I really do. Now my favorite Larry Phillips story. It has nothing to do with anything that happened on the racetrack. I had covered a race at I-70 Speedway. It was in a summer afternoon. I was back in my fairly new 1976 Ford Granada, which I thought was the coolest car there ever was. Had a straight six in it, and I was tooling down I-70. I turned south on Highway 65, and I look up ahead of me, and I see a race car on a hauler up ahead of me. And so I'm inching closer. I want to see who this is. I get closer, 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 and I see it's Larry's car. Oh, well, that's pretty cool. And I know Larry kind of knew my car because he'd make fun of me with it when I'd go over to the shop every so often. So I get closer to the car, and all of a sudden out the passenger side window, I see something white that's coming out of the passenger side window of this car. I'm thinking, is something wrong with his hauler? And I keep looking, and I inch up a little bit closer, and this thing gets longer and longer and longer, and then it breaks off, it wraps around my antenna, and what I realize is these guys are TPing my car. They must have unloaded 4 rolls of toilet paper. By the time I got to Sedalia, where I always like to stop at a Pizza Hut and finish my story and call it into the newspaper, by the time I got to Sedalia, the front end of my car looked like a mummy. It really did. And I'm sure Larry was having a great laugh about it. So, thank you, Larry. I really appreciate it. Thank you to the Ozarks Area Racers Foundation. Thank you to all of you for just making me feel so welcome back then and now. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
I can't say as I've ever had my vehicle TP going down the roads. Had a few stories behind race haulers, but not that one.